In Genesis chapter 2, verse 8, we're told that God planted a garden in Eden, but we're never told what the rest of the world looked like. We know that God called the world good throughout Genesis chapter 1, and biblical scholars tend to agree that, in this case, the Hebrew word tov, which we translate as good, means both pleasing to God and physically beautiful. Nevertheless, the fact that humanity was assigned the task of subduing the earth implies that there was still work to do. Genesis chapter 3, verse 8 says that God used to walk in the Garden of Eden, so it was a fitting place for him to dwell. As we saw in an earlier lesson, he gave priestly jobs to Adam and Eve in the garden. So the garden was also his sanctuary or temple. But these facts imply that the rest of the world was different. Through the cultural mandate, God expected human beings to spread beyond the garden's borders into the rest of the world, and to subdue it as they went, turning the entire world into God's garden sanctuary. In addition to cultivating the world, humanity was assigned the task of ruling over the animals. And we can get an idea of what this meant by looking at how God's law later provided for the humane treatment of animals. With regard to domesticated animals, Exodus chapter 20 verse 10 grants them a weekly Sabbath rest. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 10 prohibits unequal yoking, probably because of the physical stress it causes them. And Deuteronomy chapter 25 verse 4 permits an ox to eat the grain it's treading. With regard to wild animals, Exodus chapter 23 verse 11 permits them to eat from fallow fields. And Deuteronomy chapter 22 verses 6 and 7 prohibits the killing or capture of a wild bird when gathering its eggs. Our responsibilities over the earth and its creatures indicate that the world doesn't exist simply for our use. On the contrary, it primarily exists for God's use. So, as His images, it's our job to guard and manage those things He called good, and to cultivate them in ways that improve them rather than harm them. Being God's images has many implications for the way we relate to God, to other people, and to the world around us. As God's representatives on earth, our thoughts, behavior, and emotions reflect on Him. And He holds us personally responsible for carrying out our role in ways that accomplish His purposes, benefit His creation and creatures, and bring Him glory.